Welcome everyone to Bioplastics, Hype or Hope, Part 2. And I'm going to be screen sharing. I've got a few slides, so give me a second to do that. So again, thank you all for being here. My name is Joanne Martin, and I will be facilitating tonight. Thank you to our organizers and supporters. These are the visionaries and champions here for positive change. And if you were with us for part 1, you heard from several experts giving a scientific introduction to biomaterials, bioplastics. Dr. Patty DeMarco explained the circular economy for us. Dr. Clifford Lau and Taylor Weiss went deep into the pros and cons of bioplastics and the R&D underway in a variety of biomaterials. If they are here with us tonight, I can't see all the participants, but we hope that they will join in with in the discussion with questions, answering questions as they can. And hopefully, thank you. Somebody put the link to the first event in the chat for us. So tonight, our focus is to learn how new scientific advancements in this industry could contribute to phasing out fossil fuel and petrochemical-based materials and provide new economic development possibilities. We will have 3 speakers who will present for about 5 minutes each, and then we are going to open up for questions, all your questions from all of you. So please, as Mark said, put them in the chat and we will get to them at the question period. Let me take a few minutes to emphasize why these biomaterial events are so important, why we're offering this series, and also to introduce ReImagine Beaver County, a group working to mobilize change here. The Ohio River Valley region is teetering on the edge of creating a toxic valley, much like the petrochemical area in Louisiana called Cancer Alley. And I think it's a fair statement to say that our organizing partners, along with many other people, are committed to changing that narrative to one that responds to our climate crisis and embraces 21st century technologies. Biomaterials could be a central part of a paradigm shift away from fossil fuels. And as we listen to our speakers tonight describe their innovative work, keep this quote by Toni Morrison in mind: "If you can't imagine it, you can't have it." And activist and visionary Starhawk says that to change a paradigm, we must be able to say what the new paradigm is. And that's why we're here tonight, to say we want to move away from fossil fuels in the petrochemical industry, and to talk about the new technologies that people are working on to bring into this region and the whole Ohio River Valley area. ReImagine Beaver County is a project that emerged from visioning sessions in 2017 and was sponsored by Beaver County Marcellus Awareness Community and the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. Several hundred residents gathered to tell what kinds of sustainable business they would like to see in Beaver County. The residents identified 4 sectors of growth that could take advantage of the county's assets. They were energy innovation, riverfront development, sustainable agriculture, and green chemistry and manufacturing. 3 interns took the community input and did additional research and designed catalytic projects in each of these 4 sectors and put this all into a report for education and advocacy purposes. And somebody's probably going to drop a link to that report into the chat for us all. Our coalition building continued over the ensuing couple of years with the goal of bringing to life 1 or more of these catalytic projects. And recently, a team of residents chose to zero in on an eco-industrial park. And the League of Women Voters funded more research and hired downstream strategies, an environmental and economic consulting firm, to prepare for us an impact assessment toolkit. And the link to that report will be in the chat. It's comprehensive and looks at 4 different regions that are reimagining here in Southwest Pennsylvania. ReImagine Beaver's eco-industrial park idea is studied in detail. The downstream report explores green chemistry, includes calculations for a bioplastics plant and manufacturer at the Eco-Industrial Park prototype, an energy-saving calculation for a green building design, and data related to jobs created and wages, and much more. And with this toolkit and the growing coalition, this new paradigm I speak of is on the horizon. The petrochemical industry intoxicated business leaders and residents with an economic boom promise that this industry could restore Beaver County after the crash of the steel industry. That fossil fuel paradigm is not sustainable, so ReImagine Beaver County and an expanding coalition are working for this new paradigm by finding eco-friendly alternatives to plastics and building a legacy of sustainable economic growth and environmental health. Now, for our speakers, we're going to start with Eric Hurlock. And Eric is the digital editor for Lancaster Farming newspaper, where he covers the hemp industry through his award-winning weekly podcast, the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. His reporting follows hemp from research crop through post-farm legalization to exciting new commodity crop. And earlier this month, the podcast was announced as a finalist in the International News Media Association's Global Media Awards. So we'll turn it over to Eric.
So hi, everybody. My name's Eric. I am a journalist with Lancaster Farming newspaper. I've been covering the hemp industry for a couple of years now. I'm not an expert. I'm not a farmer. I just talk to a lot of people in the hemp space. And so what I'm going to do now is just sort of give you all an overview of what's happening with hemp sort of in the state and in the industry in general. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you see that? There we go. Okay, so what's the deal with industrial hemp? What's the deal with this thing? So why is hemp such a big deal? It's a very versatile crop. It grows well in many different climates and soils. It doesn't really need a lot of inputs. It grows really well organically. You don't really need pesticides or herbicides or fertilizers. And it's well known that, you can make so many things from it: paper, clothing, food, shelter, medicine, plastic, all that stuff. It sequesters carbon better than any other crops. It can remediate contaminated soil. And plus, it's got this great redemption story. You know about hemp in history, Betsy Ross and Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence on hemp paper, but then it gets vilified and outlawed in the 1930s. And now it comes back to save the day just in the nick of time, maybe. So hemp as a raw material for bioplastic. I just learned through my research for this that the preferred term is biomass-based polymers. So all parts of the plant can be used to make these polymers. It's got great cellulose content, and the technology already exists. It could be easily adopted by plastic industries without having to significantly alter or replace their equipment or infrastructure. And I personally think that the initial aim should be to replace the single-use plastics and packaging with biodegradable hemp-based plastics. And the natural fibers can replace synthetic fibers. It's just like this elegant solution to so many problems. Hemp in Pennsylvania, little background, they grew it here from, the 1600s on until the 1930s, when it was essentially made illegal. And then it was added to the controlled substance list by the Nixon administration. But then in 2014, the the U.S. Farm Bill created a legal pathway for hemp in the U.S. 2017 was the first year that you could grow hemp in Pennsylvania. There were 14 permits issued that year. I was lucky enough to see 2 of those grows, and it was like I saw a vision of the future there, standing next to 4 acres of hemp at the Rodale Institute. In 2018, the Farm Bill legalized it as a commercial commodity crop, and in 2019, there were 400 permits issued. Last year, there were over 500 grower permits issued. Most of the growers in the state are growing right now for CBD. They got into it because, there was a lot of money at stake. They were promised these sort of unrealistic profits. Now the market's saturated, and the CBD market is pretty much tanked. Some farmers are making money through creative, vertically integrated programs, and you're starting to see it like a craft industry develop. Fiber in Pennsylvania. There's lots of interest from farmers and processors and investors. About 20% of the growers last year indicated on their permit application that they were going to grow for fiber. I think that number is actually a little bit less. The biggest hurdle that we face is processing capacity. There's lots of talk about decortication machines, but there's really nothing up and running in the state right now. That's the largest problem with using hemp for a raw material for plastic. There's just nobody to process it. And the equipment that you need to process it is very expensive, especially for the large scale processing, which is what we're going to need to make this vision a reality. It's the chicken and the egg scenario too. The industry won't switch to hemp as a raw material if there's not a guaranteed supply. The farmers aren't going to grow hemp at scale without a guaranteed market. So we need big money and or government to intervene here. Supply chains are important. We learn continually that global supply chains are very fragile. Pandemics and weather events can really disrupt things. An ag-based system is going to require local supply chains. Hemp especially is big and bulky and very lightweight, so therefore it's costly to transport over great distances. The further it's transported, the less economical it is. So we need these processing centers near where we're growing the crops. And then the manufacturers that use those processed materials need to be close by too. So you can see this would set up like regional hubs. It's like I said, it's a very sort of elegant, simple solution. And I think farmers, they can save the world here if we let them. You can make biomass-based polymers from pretty much anything. It doesn't have to be hemp, but it has to be agriculture. Hemp right now captures the imagination for all those other reasons I told you about, but there are other crops that can also do this. Canaf comes to mind. You don't need a permit to grow canaf. So the vision that I think we share here is that we want to switch from oil-based manufacturing to agricultural-based manufacturing, industrial revolution, putting farmers in the center of everything, and plus all of that wonderful carbon sequestration. We could maybe get to a carbon negative situation. So the Pennsylvania hemp community is full of wonderful people. Here's some folks you could check out. Dr. Ron Kander at Jefferson is doing amazing work. Judy Wicks in Philadelphia, and all together now she's forming coalitions to build supply chains. Dawn Services, they are in Newcastle, sort of in your neighborhood. They're doing some neat work with hempcrete blight remediation and bioplastics research. I recommend your groups get together. The U.S. Hemp Builders Association, all these great people. The Department of Ag is very supportive of this program. National Hemp Association. If you want to learn more, you can listen to my podcast. And I hope I didn't go over time and I talked too fast. Thank you for listening.
I want to go to the next slide and introduce Sam Donato. And Sam is an associate research scientist at Ecovative Design. Ecovative runs a biotech research foundry aimed at developing biomaterial replacements for non-sustainable products using mycelium. Sam's role at Ecovative is focused on the fundamental research and understanding of these organisms and their applications towards optimizing bioproducts. So Sam, we're going to put you up and let you take off.
Well, thank you so much, Joanne. That was lovely and very nicely covered my first slide. So just to reiterate a bit, my name is Sam and I'm a research scientist. And again, my main role at Ecovative is really focused on fundamental and applied research and characterization and understanding the organisms that we work with. Ecovative is a biomaterials company. We're based in Troy, New York, and we work with fungal mycelium. The idea is we are trying to fabricate materials and technologies as a sustainable alternative to non-sustainable goods and products. So we have built and currently operate a state-of-the-art mycelium foundry. So this foundry gives us the capabilities to perform this fundamental and applied research, then to be able to optimize different products, kind of work them up the scale chain and demonstrate them at a pilot scale capacity. So mycelium is a complex interconnected web of fungal cells. Simply, mycelium is the vegetative root structure of a mushroom. In other words, you can think of mycelium is to a mushroom as roots are to an apple tree. They provide structure, they mine nutrients, they transfer water as well as nutrients around that network. So now there's a couple of kind of key characteristics of mycelium that we really focus on leveraging at Ecovative. So one, mycelium has this amazing capability to be able to form complex macro structures. Now, these macro structures can be in various different shapes, as I'll show in a couple of slides. So that's one. Another is that based on some of the technologies that we have innovated at Ecovative, we have the capabilities to tune the characteristics of these macro structures. And so we can leverage these characteristics towards different product applications. And three, it's bio-based and sustainable. So very simply, our products are biodegradable, which is beneficial for a lot of things, but mainly they work within the natural cycle of the earth. So given these kind of aspects, among many others, mycelium, again, gives us the ability to grow these macro structures. So here's one of our product applications. You can see it's kind of a packaging alternative to a material like styrofoam. Styrofoam, as I'm sure all of you know, is very harsh to the environment, won't break down in more years than I would like to say, but we have the ability to produce kind of an alternative product to that. You can see here 2 images just sort of showing some of the versatility and shapes that we can grow. On the left, right, we have the ability to produce custom packaging pieces for specific items. And on the right, you can just see this is kind of a typical box corner packaging piece. So this next slide is showing you a bit of a time lapse over the course of the growth period of one of our packaging pieces. And you can so really nicely see that white mycelium kind of envelop all of that food source and really form itself into that macro structure. Another area in which we've kind of optimized products is skincare, acting as high performance foam replacements. Many types of foam are petroleum-based and similarly harmful to the environment. And so here you can see 3 images of products that we've optimized, among many others in the skincare kind of general market. Another area is leather. As a replacement to animal hides. We've been able to optimize and develop a fungal-based leather. Now, this leather is completely organic and completely vegan, and less intensive on the environment in terms of resources used to produce it than the amount of resources it takes to raise animals and harvest the hide. It's also quite competitive against your typical animal hide-based leathers. And we've even optimized mycelium to produce food products. And so we've been able to grow a whole-cut plant-based alternative to meat products. This is one of the applications that we are actively working on and optimizing right now. And it's particularly exciting because we're one of the first groups who have been effectively able to produce a whole cut alternative to meat products, as opposed to most of the alternative meat products on the market, which are ground ingredients, extruded into a general shape. So this is very exciting in the way of starting to be able to challenge some of the unsustainable food production methods. And so as Ecovative continues to grow and expand, we are constantly asking questions around, how can we leverage our research on mycelium in order to produce more competitive products, in order to increase the quality of our products, and even to expand our scope. and ask questions around, are there other products that we could make with mycelium that would ultimately be more sustainable for the earth? And so thank you very much. I appreciate you listening, and I will turn it back over to Joanne.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to Eric again, and Sam as well, for giving us kind of the two alternative products here to take a look at. Let's introduce Kristen, because she's gonna bring it all home and tell us about what she's up to. Kristen is currently the grants coordinator for Mahoning County Sanitary Engineering Department and managing member of KO Consulting, which focuses on community and economic development. Kristen's grant writing has secured millions of dollars for her community and local nonprofit organizations, and she is a leader in the renaissance taking place in Youngstown, Ohio, and Mahoning Valley. And it excites me because she's my neighbor. I'm in northern Beaver County, and Kristen's not far from me. So I'm really excited to hear what she's going to tell us about tonight. And Kristen, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, I will get started. So I get to bring up, back cleanup here and go through now from we had a very scientific presentation in a sense with the two previous speakers. So I get to look at the regional opportunities for green industrial manufacturing from an economic development and capacity building lens. So what I want to talk about today is our overall project goal at KO Consulting is to illustrate the strong investment opportunities that are available through a regional approach, specifically through industrial hemp and fiber manufacturing that strategically incorporates existing financial incentives and undervalued industrial properties and infrastructure. So location, we are absolutely in this tri-state region, centrally located for regional trade and an opportunity to really lead the globe in this, I'm calling it a green manufacturing revolution. We are, you could see by the tri-state area, our location, and in terms of multi-counties, we feel that we are at the central hub to be able to utilize green manufacturing to revitalize the former steel and coal economies. Very much focused on, we are well connected here. We have the former infrastructure, rail, road, water. We've got direct access to the rail lines. We're within all our locations in this tri-state region are within minutes from the Interstate 76, 80, and much more. Ports, both on Lake Erie, the Ohio River, the two international airports, in addition to several regional airports. And we're absolutely a national gateway to New York, Chicago, and everywhere else when we think about global shipping. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight tonight was a pilot project of brownfield and industrial site redevelopment. So we can really hone in on how do we bring, hemp and this to a regional capacity that is going to be able to revitalize and redevelop economic development and job creation. So we are currently we have a project site at Castle Industrial Park, which is in Mahoning County, Ohio. You see the little circle there is our building. And what we're doing at this site is a 6,000 square foot former steel mill. We've got 8.5 adjacent acres of land to grow hemp and fiber. The utilities are current, and it's located in conjunction with downtown. And within this site, we have a green industrial manufacturing ecosystem nonprofit partner, which is really the R&D component of that facility. We've engaged a fiber company as well as some hemp companies that are looking at completing the pilot project throughout this fiscal year 2021 for us to determine what's possible for a regional infrastructure system. We've projected an annual income of around $400,000, and that we could see profits on this through this facility from leases, export, trade of around $250,000 in the first fiscal year, hopefully 2022. what this looks like in terms of incentives and partners is, there's no I in team. We really believe that we have an opportunity for us to look at this regional because, again, of the steel and the former industrial site infrastructure that exists here. If anybody's familiar with some of these incentives that I'm going to talk about briefly, most of our locations that we're looking at, the former brownfield and mill sites, they're qualifying hub zones. There's the job creation tax credit that's available. There are enterprise zones and Community Revitalization Act areas. There's industrial green zoning incentives, and the opportunity zones where eligible also helps us score higher for this type of industrial redevelopment with grants through the Community Development Block Grant and the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as EDA and the Appalachian Regional Commission. So in our research, we had discussion with other states that hemp programs were a little bit farther along, and we talked about the opportunities that they believe that exist in being able to ramp up the type of production that is going to be needed for industrial hemp use. And that's the lake to river corridor from Cleveland through Pittsburgh and West Virginia, where we have the infrastructure from the steel industry and the coal industry, really already lays the infrastructure and the workforce that gives us an opportunity to really look at this regionally. We also know that within this footprint, there's dozens of accredited universities and colleges, business incubators, nonprofits specializing in workforce development and or policy research, i.e. Most of us on this discussion tonight. There's apprenticeship and training programs that are available through in partnership with labor unions, trade schools, and other areas. We really see the opportunity for us to do this regionally as the biggest strength for our opportunity for economic revitalization and green manufacturing. So the combination of impact funding, opportunity zone designation, and the former planning and infrastructure that already exists in this tri-state region really allows for a unique chance to make significant social, economic, and environmental impact regionally if done in a collaborative partnership manner. That's all for me at this point. If you have any questions or need to reach out, this is my contact info. Please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, thank you, Kristen. So everybody that doesn't live here, you all want to move here now with that positive and really exciting potential that Kristen laid out there for us. If I didn't live here, I think I'd want to move here. So I'm going to go right to some questions that we have. And let me start back with, this is directed to Eric. And these questions, it looks like, Mark, you're kind of putting them in some kind of order, but I'll just move through them. And this will help everybody get a little deeper understanding. So Edward Wren asks, what does the word biodegradable mean for hemp-based polymers in this discussion by Eric? My understanding is that this is such an imprecise term legally that it can be used for greenwashing. Eric, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not a chemist, so I don't really understand what these things mean. But the people I've talked to suggested, yeah, that it could lead to the exact same problem that we have with petrochemicals. So,
Eric, can you start your video?
Oh.
We'd love to see your face.
Oh, hello.
Great.
So yeah, but if we have the chance to design this industry sort of from the ground up, I feel like we should be able to design like the end of life of these products too, right? Like we have to reimagine the systems. And yeah, I mean, I guess the basic definition for me, biodegradable, would be that it would break down into, you know, back into soil, really. I don't really know, but it's a great question, and I think there's people who are much smarter than me who are going to figure that out.
I don't know, Sam, maybe you want to speak to that, given or even Kristen. I know that you're either one of you, if you want to add to that.
I mean, I am also not an expert in you know the term biodegradable, but I tend to agree. I think, you know, from my perspective, I see it as trying to design products that have the capability to kind of go back into the natural ecosystem. So whether that is, you know, for example, our products are non-toxic to surrounding plant life, as well as microbial life. And so, you know, I can't speak directly to the, you know, the intricate chemistry of what's happening, you know, at a chemical or molecular level. But I think one of the main takeaways is avoiding these micro particles like microplastics that get really, really small, but don't actually reincorporate into the food chain or into the natural cycle of things.
Thanks, Sam. Kristen, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I would, the only thing I would just like to add, since we're recording and we're live, is I do want to clarify, I actually left my government job at the end of November. So all this is free, you know, not on government time. So I did want to make sure I mentioned it. It dawned on me I needed to mention that.
I must have had an old bio. Sorry about that. Okay, the next question from Samantha. I've never heard of CNAF. Does it have the same potential for soil regeneration that hemp does?
I am just learning about it myself lately, but I feel like hemp is a much better soil remediator than CNAF would be. But I'll have to get back to you because I'm just now learning more about CNAF.
Great, thanks for that. Gail Murray asks us, how much water does hemp farming require?
It is relatively drought resistant. You know, it needs a certain amount of water to get going in the beginning. And I mean, I'm not sure if you're looking for quantities of water, but yeah, it can survive pretty well. I mean, it does grow like a weed. It sort of thrives in sometimes some adverse conditions. So it's not, I wouldn't call it needy for water.
If I could just comment too, I think the water issue is one of the reasons why our region is also primed to be a leader in this. You know, we do have lake to river water access. And when you're talking about laying down, you know, my understanding is raw water's fine in some circumstances for some of the industrial, depending on what you're doing. And that's one of the reasons why we've looked at our former sites that are along the river. Is we think that we have an opportunity to use, you know, our location in conjunction with those needs.
Thank you. This might be directed for Kristen, but anybody else can speak to it. Also from Gail, can all of these products be manufactured at the same location? How many people could it employ? And I know, Eric, you had a couple of slides that spoke to the industry, and Kristen as well. So maybe both of you want to say a little bit more about how many products, I guess different kinds of products is what she's asking to be manufactured. You listed off a few, Eric, I think, and
I mean, from my perspective, the sky's the limit, right, Eric? And I think Sam would agree too. We could make everything from what we're talking about tonight, from ropes to clothing material to building materials. And I mean, my particular interest is as many industrial sites as 60,000 square foot as we can, producing different products and materials and employing thousands, right? That's the end goal here. And that's certainly could be a reality if we put this as a priority for, you know, our regional economic impact.
Yeah, and I think
Eric,
we bring in some, you know, more farming jobs too, and all of the sort of ancillary jobs that go along with agriculture. Yeah, I mean, if we bring manufacturing back in a sustainable way, I feel like there's going to be jobs for everybody. But I'm a dreamer.
I just want to, thanks. I just want to say that I noticed that Taylor Weiss and Patty DeMarco are with us tonight. And I can't, and Dr. Clifford Lau is with us as well. So welcome back to you all from part one, Bioplastics Hyper Hope. So if there's anything you want to add or any questions you have, we're just kind of ding Mark there or me, and I'll try to zero in for any questions or comments you have as well. Thanks.
I'd like to just add the comment on the hemp. It has been targeted as a way to remediate formerly mined land because it is a much better adherent of poor soil, and it helps to rebuild the soil. It doesn't require as much water as either tobacco or corn. And in many places, especially in Kentucky, where they were formerly growing tobacco, they're looking at growing hemp because some of the infrastructure for gathering and drying the fibers is already present in tobacco farms. And as they're finding the markets shrinking for tobacco, they're looking at hemp, industrial hemp, as a replacement crop. And it doesn't need the amount of fertilizer and pesticide and herbicide that either corn or tobacco require. It has fewer pests.
Thank you, Patty, for digging deeper on that. We have a question here. Someone is interested in learning about containers for plant-based meals and plant-based meat. Eric, did you touch on that, I think, or?
I can touch on that a little bit. That is definitely something that we at Ecovative have thought about, something we've actually even done just as a demonstration. And it's, it is not one of our active lines of research, but it's absolutely possible. And, it's even possible at a home scale. I encourage people to look up, at home working with mycelium. It's quite accessible, and you'll find it's quite easy to do. And it's very simple to mold, to mold a shape, and to grow your own types of products at a small scale in that respect. In terms of scaling up and hopefully in the future having whether it's Ecovative or another company having a distribution of these types of containers at the same volume or a similar volume that you see takeout containers at restaurants and things like that. It is both absolutely possible as well as something that is on our radar and something we would very much like to see come to fruition.
Thanks, Sam, for chiming in on that. Kristen, I'm wondering, with that question, but what is, just looking at this economic and development piece and kind of moving out of the science for a minute, back into the economic development, maybe we can toggle back and forth, but what's the first step in creating a green manufacturing corridor or hub? I mean, what was the first thing you all did back in, we had a presentation, I think, Eric, the chicken and the egg situation. I don't know if that's relevant here, but what do we do first here in Beaver County if we want to move in this direction?
I personally still think there's a lot of education pieces that need to be worked out. We need to have, it sounds, might sound funny, but we need to have these type of forums a couple of times a month, if not more, if not weekly. If there is a education component that has to go on to what industrial fiber and industrial hemp and the Sam's presentation, we have to get out in front of the public and the policymakers and have a shared education piece to some of this, in dovetailing and in lockstep with procuring sites, looking at former manufacturing sites, looking at financial incentives that exist to get equipment and to get grants for companies to get startup testing materials and the laboratory and the additional R&D and how to connect to that with a public, private, and nonprofit partnerships, I think is really the key. We do have a lot more of really talking. I think we're just on the cusp of people understanding that this is incredibly game changing. And when you're looking at clusters and you're looking at hubs and regionally, there's a lot of opportunity for some planning that needs to occur, where, which farmers, which areas, which farmers, which agricultural needs are needed, how much land is needed to yield X amount of products, and all that stuff and put into some type of regional strategy and blueprint is I really think the first step. And if you're looking at it from a county base, your county identifying land, property, parcels, former locations. And it's our consulting firm, you got to go down to who owns these industrial sites, what cleanup do they need? And that's where, that's the work we want to do. We want farmers to farm, and we need to bring everybody's specific niche expertise into this process and work in a collaborative regional manner to ensure that we're competing with other states that have, particularly in the West, that are a little bit out ahead of us with, hemp, marijuana. I know we're not talking about marijuana today, but, there's a lot of people who have been out in front, and we've got a little catch-up work to do.
Can you say a little bit about the R&D too? And I bring this up related to some people that are expressing concerns that bioplastics, it's really too soon to consider them, there's still problems with bioplastics and other biomaterials. It's not a ready-made replacement for fossil fuel. So where are we, either regionally or even government-supported policy-wise, with R&D that can help support the rigorous testing that needs to happen?
I think there's R&D funding out there, but it does have to have the proper, the caveat is it has to have the proper public-private partnership. You have to have government, governmental entities or 501c3s or CIC, community improvement corps, that are interested in looking at, hey, we want to do this. We've identified XYZ companies. They want to come in and do the R&D. Let's look at creating, the pipeline for research and development. And that's one of the things, having a green industrial manufacturing ecosystem nonprofit was one of the reasons that we brought a nonprofit on board of the Project Purged, so they could look at Small Business Innovative Research grants, some of the stuff that's coming out of the National Institute of Health for testing. And I do think there's avenues for R&D available, but the planning has to be right and the project partners have to be right.
Yeah, it feels daunting, but very possible all at the same time. Jonathan Brady is asking a little bit, kind of digging into the mycelium and hemp-based shelf life. He has a question about shelf lives, and he gives an example. If he's selling applesauce and he needs a packaging that will not degrade on his customer's shelf within their pantry. What can our, Sam, maybe you can say something about shelf life and the material itself?
Yeah. So, one of the, I guess, trade-offs, personally, I don't really see it as a trade-off, but one of the considerations when trying to optimize bio-based plastics or bio-based materials is that you are going to lose some of the rigor, physical rigor of plastics. Plastics are here for many reasons, but one of those is that they are incredible at what they do. Just from, a product point of view. So, our products, for example, they will last a bit. I don't think I can give you an exact time scale off the top of my head, but, a few weeks, they will last. But it's definitely a consideration and something that, is either would have to be optimized through further research, through, a combination of biotech or bio and technology, or would have to be something that we as a collective society begin to adjust our expectations around, and recognize that if we want to, live in this world with sustainable products, we might have to adjust expectations of shelf life. Now, that's not exactly realistic for a lot of businesses and a lot of processes, and I recognize that. But it is, I think it is definitely something that it should be a conversation and something that we should touch on.
I kind of chuckled when you said maybe we're going to have to adjust our expectations. You're talking about human beings here. We want what we want. We want what we want, right?
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. And go ahead.
So that's but you make a good point that we may have to learn to live differently. And I think Patty talked a bit about that in part 1 on circular economy, that we're going to need to make a lot of changes in how we use materials management and systems, and there needs to be the zero waste process. Patty, do you want to say something about adjusting our expectations? I think be able to guide us
the whole concept, we were sold by the chemical industries and the plastics industry, the concept of convenience being something that you use once and throw away. And we can redirect that to understand that the disaster that we've accumulated in all of this non-biodegradable material has come at a cost. And sometimes, understanding that to prevent that cost, that burden, not only on ourselves, but on future generations, on all of life, down to the minute pieces that are out in the middle of the ocean, we might need to adapt our expectations a bit. And looking at things that, okay, if you're going to make something out of a material that doesn't degrade for 400 years or more, it had better be something that you want to last for 400 years or more, like maybe sewer pipes, or things like that, or structural materials, where that kind of longevity and resilience is an essential component. But for something you're going to use for 5 minutes and throw away, this is an inappropriate design criterion. So I think it's matching the functions to the structure. I'm a biologist, so that's where you start. The structure follows the function. And I think we have to just begin thinking about our materials. And then the concept of investing all this energy and resources into something that has a useful life of 12 minutes. This is ridiculous. We are throwing away not only the material itself, but all of the embedded energy and effort into making it. So having the argument about getting real about what we need as opposed to what we have been sold, and becoming critical consumers and critical designers, and say, the time to think about the fate of something is not when you're ready to throw it away, but at the point where you're putting it out into the market in the first place. And that burden has to be more heavily placed on the manufacturers. It is not going to happen by the market forces themselves. The invisible hand of the market isn't going to do it. Consumers by themselves are not going to be able to do this. We have to have a law that places the burden for that design criteria, and also for reclaiming what you can't reuse has to go back on the manufacturers, because as soon as they see that as a negative salvage value, something that costs them, they're going to figure out how to make less of it.
Yeah, and I see a comment here from Melanie, and I just want to amplify this from the point of view of everything everybody's bringing, Eric and Sam and Kristen. Melanie says, you all are providing climate action solutions rather than worrying the public with climate issues. And so I think that's an important piece, and as Kristen talked about, the need for frequent education. There's a lot of opportunity here for us all to learn and educate ourselves. What are the opportunities and possibilities, and to stay in possibility rather than getting mired in the crises, which kind of can paralyze all of us. So a question along that line, Jacob asks, what are your favorite hemp and mycelium products? And I can kind of couple that with what potential do you see for mycelium in mass production of clothing? So I guess we're digging a little bit deeper into Sam and Eric. What are some of the possibilities here? Going back to let's provide more solutions. Either one of you can go, Eric or Sam.
I can kick it off. Personally, one of my favorite products. Hard to choose, of course, but I would say that the food application that we're working on currently, I think I see as very interesting from the point of view of the fact that again we're kind of one of the first groups to be able to provide this whole cut alternative, and so that freshness, that kind of newness of opportunity, I think is very exciting. But at the same time, it is closely rivaled with the textile applications and the leather. Just from a personal point of view, that's incredibly interesting to me. And I apologize. Can you repeat the second follow-up question?
Well, yeah, the second question was, what potential did you see for mycelium in the mass production of clothing? And I know you mentioned that, so maybe you've answered that.
Yeah, so clothing is a really interesting industry. From the simple application of clothing, like a shirt or like cloth, is something that we're not. I think the alternative market for material is still kind of catching up on. There are certainly options, sustainable cotton and things like that. They all have caveats, but from a mycelium point of view, where we are right now with the technology, I think the application would be much more realistic in the shipping of clothing or helping in aspects of the production of clothing. But with that said, I mean, we have, like I said in my slide deck, we have developed applications in textiles. And I think that that's a very close, application to clothing. Certainly something that we are excited about pursuing and continuing to develop. So the potential, I think, is there, but it does require some more attention and some more work on the mycology side to kind of get to the point of being able to grow, cloth like this.
Eric, do you want to add anything here on products?
Sure. I think my favorite thing to be made out of hemp, it's hempcrete. You can build houses out of it. And it's just simple, it's hemp herds. It's like the woody core of the hemp stalks mixed with a binder made out of lime and water. You mix it together and you can cast it or spray it, and you can build houses. It's not structural, so you have to still build some kind of frame, and then you sort of encase the frame in this hempcrete, and it's fire resistant, it's mold resistant, it's antimicrobial, it's breathable. And the best part is it's not like typical American construction where you're sort of wrapping your house in plastic. It's not Tyvek and all of these weird moldy drywall things. It's just this beautiful, simple, elegant way to build houses. So it's, in my mind, I like to, I grew up here in rural Chester County on the southeastern part of the state, and all of those beautiful fields that I enjoyed as a kid now are neighborhoods. So I would like to see a world where, we're not building houses in the fields, but we're, growing the material to build the houses in the fields. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah I think farmers can be doing so much more than we're letting them do right now. So hempcrete.
Yeah. I like it. Bob asks, how much pollution will there be in bioplastics versus Petrol? I know we might have touched on that a little bit, but I want to, it's one of the biggest issues out there on pushback in this field.
If we're going to redesign the system, we have to also change our behavior. So hopefully a whole lot less pollution.
Back to changing behavior.
Yeah.
I think we need a sociologist as part of our next program to talk to us about how are we going to change our behaviors?
Yeah, mass community change. Yeah, I mean, I think, in an ideal world, we would change, recognize the difficulties there. I think it sort of gets back to trying to better design this sort of circular economy, right? So that the idea being, at least kind of from our perspective, is like, can we get something out there? Can we put something into consumers' hands where they don't have to change their life, right? You can keep living the way that you're living, keep the same habits that you keep, and just know that when you toss this thing in the trash or when you throw it out of your car window, ideally not, but if you do, it's not going to sit there for 10,000 years or however long, right? So I think that kind of gets at it, but an aspect certainly will be an evolving society.
Yeah. Kristen, this one might be for you. You touched on it. Maybe dig a little deeper. Gail asks, could these industries be done with private public investments? Do you see any possibility of government support? I guess that's the word subsidy that comes up. Gail didn't say that, but I'm asking about that. You want to jump on that one?
Sure. I mean, I think that, it's how do you utilize what's already out there for some of the incentives that exist? So even on, when you're talking about processing equipment for hemp, for example, there's grant monies that are available that would already pay for the processing equipment. When we're talking about subsidies and getting tax credits and additional pools in the financial incentive pool chest from a policy standpoint, that's where we have to push a lot more investment into green technologies, changing standards. I mean, some of that exists, and I have to say we've been pleasantly surprised by the local government here understanding the vision, being a perfect public-private partner, getting where we're trying to go, talking about some job creation, tax incentives locally and some different things. And they're even, when you look at the job creation tax incentives, they don't, if you're creating a job, you're creating a job. That tax incentive exists to the extent when you fill out those applications, you don't necessarily have to, dive into the very specifications of the industry, as long as the industry is, something that is legally recognized, which of course now hemp is. So, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for public-private partnerships. I mean, my experience, I've been writing grants for over a decade, and it really comes down to planning and having the right partners in on the project. And that is where you could find the incentives and I don't think it necessarily has to be the same old. We're working very hard right now on putting together a grant application for a planning grant for the tri-state area to look at how we build regional pipelines. And, when I say the right partners have to be there, for us to come out from a regional perspective and do this correctly, a lot of different people have to be at the table in order to ensure that you're creating the circular economy and the supply chain correctly. And I think that is where, that's the work we're trying to push. Rising tide lifts all ships, right? So we are trying to push for our region to be competitive, multi-state here. We have to do this together and in a way that we're going to have the best leverage also for larger congressional delegations and senators from 3 states. That's 6 of them, and then when you throw in how many representatives that is from those 3 state areas, now you're talking about having the right wind and gale force winds for the politics of it, which is important. Whether I know we don't like to talk about that, but the politics of it is incredibly important. And I just think if we look at it, what it could do regionally, that's the best way to go about it.
Thank you for that. I just think it needs to be pointed out. We have a comment here that fixing the world cannot be in the hands of consumers. We need favorable practices enforced and mandated by favorable policy. So I just tack that on to, and that's actually by Kristen's partner, Samantha, who chimed in with that. But that that underscores some of what Patty said earlier, and well, all of you have been speaking to, is that there needs to be an adjustment to our expectations. So truly, I have to find some sociologists who speak to, or maybe psychologists. Maybe we've gone that far. We have a question. We're kind of toggling back and forth between economic development and some of the product material. People seem to be very intrigued and interested in the aspects of the products. Tara asks, as bioplastics break down, can they be reused? Anybody speak to that? I know I got a C in chemistry, so I can't answer that, but.
This is Dr. Taylor Weiss. Can everyone hear me? I presented on some of this
Sure,
last week.
Taylor, come on, join us.
Yeah, I was hearing part of the biodegradable discussion. So let me start there. Yes, biodegradable purely describes a process, right? It's breaking down due to biological activity. It is a useless word. This is basically why Australia recently banned its use, because it has been so abused and tweezed and all that. What people need to know is what we're concerned about is what are the plastics doing as they break down? And the word we really kind of should be using for reintegrates into the environment is essentially metabolizable. Can a living thing break it down, bring it into a system, and completely use it for energy or some other purpose and not die from it? It's not toxic along the way. Because one of the problems with biodegradable is, yes, life breaks it down, but it's also poisonous along the way. Maybe not to that same organism, but to something else, right? A really good standard, if you want to know if a plastic is probably safe in the environment, is basically, do we put it in people in medical equipment? If we don't shove it into your body, it's probably not going to also be 100% safe in the environment. That's a pretty decent standard to think about it. With respect then to this question of if you make it biodegradable, can you reuse it? That's the point. For many of these plastics, the problem is either you need to make that plastic essentially 100% like inert, chemically irremovable and all that stuff so that nothing affects it. It never degrades, therefore you can always recycle it. But the problem with that, to make it that inert means it's inert. It's going to stay that way forever if you lose track of it. And also the way to keep biology away from doing things with it is to make it toxic. So a wholly, completely, irrevocably plastic is sort of the farthest end of the spectrum that you never want to lose track of. Biodegradable, biologically made, the whole point is that it will degrade, it will break down, it will become worse. But that gives you the opportunity to remake it. So rather than blending inferior with virgin, you're remaking it or reutilizing it as something else. And what a lot of people like me work on is that this current idea of recycling as plastic to plastic, again, there's plenty of information out there these days, but very, very little plastic actually becomes new plastic. Very, very little. And I would even stay away from these ideas of, my fleece is made out of recycled pop bottles, and that's a good thing. Well, you just shredded it into microfibers faster. That's actually not terribly helpful. The point here is imagine a world where you don't go from petroleum to plastic and back and forth to plastic or the landfill. Imagine a world where you go from biological material and go plastic, and then that plastic goes back to biological material. Or we down select it into things like fuels, right? We build it up into a plastic and then we make it into butanol and then we burn it as a fuel and it reintegrates in the environment that way. And the reason then for recapture and reutilization becomes every bit of plastic I get is feedstock for the next thing that I want, right? So loss is not it. And I'll additionally add along, government interaction, things like that, right? It's a lot about building momentum, people asking the government, responding to people, many of those sorts of things. But there also has to be some recognition of, local versus sort of federal level interests. It should not surprise you that of 80% of the plastic waste that ends up in the ocean in the United States, it comes from the coastal states. Montana is not a big contributor. Montana doesn't feel as strongly about this subject, right? Wyoming, that sort of thing. And so even at a state level, there has to be some recognition of we're the source of the problem. We're also the ones who will benefit from it. If you're on the coast, you probably have fishing, and that fishing is being impacted by, uncaptured plastic waste in some respect, right? And so there's never going to be one size fits all solution. It's still going to boil down to local problems, local, resources. How do you compete? If you're following someone else, you're probably already lost, because you need to be forging your own path, utilizing your expertise, your unique resources, what makes you competitive in the market. And so it is a great, big, huge, hard problem, but you can make progress. And I'll finally lead off with the other thing to keep in mind is really simple things. People may have seen a lot of things on like plastic bag bans or things like that. And that's not actually largely true in most of the world. What many places are banning is the very thin plastic bags, for the simple reason of they're almost worthless upon reuse. They easily blow waste, they're very easily lost, and they literally clog up the equipment we use to sort plastics to make other recycling possible. And so most of the bans just simply say, we don't want these really cheap ones. We upscale to a thicker, those heavy, durable bags you might see in like clothing stores more often, for two reasons. One, if people buy that bag for like a nickel, every time they buy a bag, they're thinking, can I reduce my cost by just not buying more bags? And two, it's strong enough to actually be reused. All of us has experienced that. You go home, you've got those thin shopping bags, and half of them tear. They can never be reused. Remember, the whole point is first reduce, then reuse, then recycle, etc. Right? So prioritizing how we direct these goods. And the reason why the plastic bag bans have actually worked among government agencies, that it's good for the government who's dealing with the waste. It's good for the people who get basically a better product they can save money with if they so choose. It's only the people selling the plastic bags who kind of feel strongly about shifting expectations. Right.
Well, Taylor was with us in part one. Thank you for that. He's from Arizona. Was it Arizona State University?
Right. Thank you.
I think you were fairly characterized as an algae expert, but it sounds like
Yes.
You got a lot of knowledge. But one of the things that I remembered and actually made a note before tonight, if you joined us, was how do we characterize the benefits? You had said that the first thing there had to be is public demand. And maybe this goes back to getting a sociologist here to join us. How do we, you talked about the challenges to identify the advantages. And I think, even listening to some of Eric's presentation and talking about, the land in southeastern Pennsylvania would rather see using some of these products. I mean, he's sold on it, but how do we sell the general public?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about this in sustainability respect to, right, understand we can approach it from the pure science, things like life cycle analyses. We can approach it from pure dollars, cost to run these programs and things like that. And generally speaking, in any kind of innovations these days, it should be better for the environment and it should be better for the economy. That's a pretty guiding principle, right? Makes sense. The problem at the interface is essentially, right, what we can say is the best scientifically may not always be the best for people. That is the role of government, to essentially say, where are we willing to make accommodations? Where are we not willing to say, hey, we should turn all of Pennsylvania into a garbage dump because it's better for the other 49 states. That sort of a thing, right? The interface in economy is, right, thing is only worth, it is a function of the energy and the resources that go in, but it's also the function of the value that people essentially attach to it, right? It's kind of that X factor. So we can give you the really hard science, life cycle analyses, energy, all that stuff. The actual intrinsic value of it is still essentially set by people. People make their own value choices on things like, does it support my local economy? It's a funny thing. People like to buy local because they know the money stays in their community and it comes back to them. It feeds their schools and things like that. To give you some idea of where plastics people have discussed, Texas, Central Texas, like where I did grad school, had things like a never frozen beef pack. That is all the local companies except big burger joints, things like that, would only buy beef never frozen. That meant a superior product. It meant they're supporting the local economy. It meant they could justify a higher price. Everyone felt better about it, and it forced value in the local area. Also, from a sustainability point, it really simply cut out trucking and transportation. It's a more sustainable practice. You could start
you
things.
Spoke to that. Yeah, the trucking and transportation. You talked, Eric, I think, about the mass of the product and how expensive transportation is.
Yeah.
And I think, Kristen, you've also spoken to this regional, keeping it regional and local. We've got the assets here locally. We've got transportation. We've got access to water. So that seems to partner a bit with what you're saying, Taylor.
Right. So even having, local plastic purchases, making a commitment to, if you're going to use bioplastics, be buying from companies that are local. Cut out the transportation, support the local economy, reinject the money, and build up steam that way.
If I could just add real quick, I think it's critical to look at what we learned about the supply chain with the coronavirus, for example, right now. If there is a time to make the argument to local economies, buy local, look at local supply chains, we should be walking away from that right now. And I think that that's part of why I look at 2021 so critical for planning and public education on, well, how do we do this? How do we recreate these regional, local, scalable economies that could be dispersed then globally, and why local manufacturing and food production and all of this is critical, and we have to tie it in. I think if there's the possibility and the chance now to look at these things from a real policy side, now is the push to be made now too, in conjunction with, we look at what flew off our shelves and couldn't be restocked because we couldn't get it here, right? So that's got to be part of when we're talking about changing behavior. Everybody recalls what the grocery stores and stores have looked on products we need day-to-day use has looked like the last year. So having that conversation on local economies and buy local and why now may be the time to push, I think dovetails with a lot of what we're talking about.
It does. It really does. I just want to do a time check, and it's almost 8:20, and I want to give each of our speakers tonight an opportunity. If there's something that after we've had this discussion that you feel a burning need to speak to before we leave each other, we don't have to stop exactly at 8:30, but I'd like to honor that time commitment, particularly for the speakers who gave us generously of their time tonight. But if there's like a closing thoughts that you'd like to share with all of us, I want to open space for that.
I think I would just go first in saying that, a lot of the discussion and the questions on, by defining biodegradable and the plastics. And sometimes I think my message I want to be is, we have to start somewhere, right? And sometimes I feel like as a society, we're like, well, if we don't hit the home run, we shouldn't try to get on to first base. Sorry for sports analogy if they don't work. So
basketball, we should be on basketball.
But I think that it's critical for us that we're not going to be, completely a green economy overnight, right? This is a generational mission now, right? It's going to take that long. It's going to take, decades time. So it's, where are there little wins? How can we support, some new sustainable companies? How can we support the work that Sam's company is doing? What does that look like? We don't have to get everything all in one go. We have to think incrementally and show that it's possible to get where, set the goal. This is where we want to be in 10, 15, 20 years. But we've got to start today, somewhere on some viable piece of this puzzle, even with what we're trying to do with regional planning. At least let's look at all the farmland that's available in all the states. Let's look at, blighted industrial properties. Let's look at where pilot projects could pop up and start. I think we get too consumed with, if we're not fixing everything all at once, then, we're not doing a good enough job. We just have to start somewhere and grow from there.
I appreciate hearing that. That really resonates for me. And back to the quote I said earlier, if you can't imagine it, you can't have it. So we have to start somewhere. Some of the ideas that, the products that Ecovative Design is talking about and the products that Eric introduced, that's that piece, like that Kristen's saying, we're starting. That's where we're starting. Eric and Sam, do you want to?
I had never heard that Toni Morrison quote before, but that's something I think about all the time, is like, we have to be bold enough to imagine it, or we're not going to get anywhere. So it's really just great to be among a group of people here tonight who are, using powers of imagination to create the world that we want. We had like this, the 20th century was rough. They foisted all kinds of stuff on us, and like we sort of need to take it back a little bit. So I thank you all for one, inviting me here tonight to talk, and just, I really loved hearing you all speak. And it's great to know that folks on the other side of Pennsylvania are also as engaged and imaginative and thoughtful as I hope we are on this side of the state. So thank you.
And imagine that, Ohio too. Kristen's right there in Ohio. It's yeah. Sam, anything you want to say?
I mean, I'll just kind of continue the sentiment here of I really, really love that quote. And I think Ecovative is a great example of this in practice. I mean, Ecovative is the product of a kind of a crazy dream of two undergrad kids. 13 years ago when they were in their dorm room doing this work, but literally people were saying this is absurd. And 13 years later, which is not a very long time, here we are with applications and some incredible material. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is it's a few. One, continue the conversation. It's so critical. Even if it's short, even if it's in passing, it helps to build this shift of a society, and we are helping to build what we see as ideals. That's one. Another is honestly allow yourself to dream. Allow yourself to really just simply dream about the future that you want to see, because it's the quote says it all. You can't build it if you can't dream about it. And that's one of the through line ideals at Ecovative is there isn't an idea that's too outlandish. And then I think I'll just finish on hold on to hope, because if I can say anything about being in the applied research, working with some of these organisms, it's that the applications are potentially endless. I think that we not only could build a future that is more sustainable than where we're at now, but quite literally, we could build a future with products that are new, yet to be thought of, and incredible. So I really think that this is very hopeful. I appreciate this very much. I'm very fortunate to be here. Thank you for having me, and really let yourself dream and have some hope.
I appreciate that. I think that many of the people and the supporters that are on here tonight are dreamers, they're visionaries. They've been coming up with creative, innovative ways to continue this conversation. I think Kristen's right. We probably should have more of these events. And Michelle Fetting, who has been a real big pusher, and Deb Smith behind organizing these events. We're really we're going to put them to work to keep helping us bring some more forward. So continuing the conversation, I just want to flash a slide for a minute. I want to have the ReImagine Beaver County email address up here visible. No, actually, I don't have it there. I'll have to drop it in the chat. I thought I made a slide with, I have a slide here. There it is. There's the email address for ReImagine Beaver County. So be in touch with us, whoever you are, whether you're a proponent of what we're talking about tonight or even a challenger. I think that it's important to hear from those that do challenge some of these ideas, because it pushes us all more to our edges to dig deeper. And I think we need that dialogue, the back and forth. It feels tough, but I think that helps us get to some of these forward-looking places. And we'd love to hear from entrepreneurs, developers, investors who want to be part of this new paradigm build-out, this design that Kristen is talking about, and bringing people together, I think is the next step that we're going to take here at ReImagine Beaver County and with our partners and collaborators. So I don't know if there's any final words. I don't see any last burning questions here in the chat. Mark, if I missed something, maybe you can back me up. But I'm so grateful to all of our speakers tonight, Eric and Sam and Kristen. And I appreciate Patty and Taylor joining us from part one and continuing the dialogue and kind of giving some more energy, positive energy to imagining a new future for this region outside of petrochemicals. So, Mark, anything that we should wrap up with?
I just want to mention the event presenters. So we've got ReImagine Beaver County Marcellus Awareness Community, League of Women Voters of PA, Climate Reality Project, and the Breathe Project. And thank you, Joanne, and thank you to all the speakers for really just a phenomenal program here today. I think you've outdone yourselves and sparked a lot of imagination, and that's exactly what we needed.
Yeah, it's good. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
well,
you.
And appreciate. Yeah, thank you for being a visionary and a change maker. All of you.